wait for finish, John. Let's finish typing.
I heard everything.
I know you did, B. Yeah.
I heard everything, man.
Your ears are trained to industry, talent, creative conversations. You can listen to probably 4 things at once.
At least.
Welcome back, Jonathan, to the compound. I mean, you haven't been in this compound, but you have been to the feeling and the vibe and the aura from being in the Bronx compound, the Bronx Gallery compound, from signing Slick Rick, diamond dusted prints with Rick in the old compound, which was one of my favorite moments, man. What do you think about the new place and space?
Ceilings are higher. It's more peaceful. You look out the window, you see Lady Liberty. You don't just see cars passing above. You know, it's more free. It's just like, but it still feels like you. Like the essence of it hasn't changed. You know, I don't know whether this is like 2.0 for you or like 10.0.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've been at this a long time. I'm just so happy for you, for the elevation, for the journey, for the leather couches, for the vintage barber chairs. Like anybody who's like not been here, it's a vibe.
No, thank you, man.
It's a vibe, man. It just it continues to reflect, you know, the careful choices that you make to curate an authentic life and share that with, you know, the great people in your world.
Thank you, man. You being a photographer, knowing high ceilings.
High ceilings are everything.
Everything
man.
for you, right?
I could live in a 10 by 10, but if you got 18-foot ceilings, I'm like, I can dream.
You can get busy.
Dream, you know?
So, Compound Conversations is just me having great conversations with friends and just people that I adore who brought things to the world. And you definitely fall in that category, man. So, you know, a lot of people, they might only know the album cover. They might only know the interview. They might, you know, that might be it. You know, they don't get to hit. And a lot of, you know, Tom interviews, it's the right now moment. And it's never, where's he from originally? You know, everybody might think you from Brooklyn or, you know, Midtown. But so let's just go all the way back to the beginning. What was the start of little Jonathan Mannion? Where were you born and who you grew up with, and you know how impactful was that on your life?
Yeah. Well, John Mannion, because that's what I used to be. Like that was the differentiation between like moving to New York and being home. Like my people, everybody through my life was John Mannion. Jon Mannion, all through school, all through that. So, and then when I moved to New York, I found that it was a bigger gutter credit to have Jonathan Mannion. I was like, oh, let's extend it. Let's like take up some space and kind of grow into this crazy world that I was, you know, beginning to navigate. But I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, a small town called Bay Village, full suburbs, you know, but I wasn't kind of that mentality. Right? My dad is from Brooklyn.
Okay.
Like, what was he? 3rd Street, 7th Avenue.
Wow.
3rd Street, 7th Avenue. Like, so it's like Park Slope. Basically now.
Cobble Hill and all that, yeah.
You know, my granddad worked on the docks, threw bare knuckle boxing matches in Brooklyn in the middle of the street. Like, rough, you know, Brooklyn, authentic, original Brooklyn, you know? And then my mother's from London. And so, you know, I felt like I had that refinement. I spent a lot of time in the UK. So even though I was like a suburban kid, typical riding your bike to school, playing soccer in big wide open fields, 10-minute walk to the lake, you know, Lake Erie. Like I wasn't of that space mentally. It was always a creative household. There were always art books. My parents are both painters. So that was sort of what I grew up around. It was always encouraged. Like, yo, here's, you know, people were getting the like 16 crayon boxes, you know, and I had like the 64 art boxes. I was
with the flip top and the sharpener.
Sharpener, man. Dual sharpeners, maybe one you could take out and one built in. Like, I wasn't playing; they weren't playing as well. And I think that encouragement and that understanding that was a viable way to be and to live allowed me to pursue a career in art. You know, whereas like many, I guess, parents of some kids, you know what I mean? We're like, no, man, you got to go to med school, law school. This is what we know. You need a good bank job. You need something really safe and conservative, you know? Like, It's like, no, go be free. Like, and traveling expanded my mind. So, you know, Ohio, I rep it. You know, it's always going to be home. The home I grew up in is still a home we have, you know? But then moving to New York was like, this is where I live. This is what I'm, you know, moved by. which
So
was,
let me
which was
ask you,
hip hop.
let's not go to New York yet.
Great.
So growing up, family was painters. A lot of art was in the house.
Oh yeah.
Pretty much their art, maybe other art. Was it
Mainly others' art, which
art.
is sort of what I've carried on as sort of like a theme in my own. Like I know my own work, you know, like that's part of, I can close my eyes and see it all, you know. Even before it happens, I can see it oftentimes. But I want to be inspired by other people's work.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
was it growing up, and I don't know if you could even answer this, or was it a feeling that you like, wow, I didn't never look at it like that. But seeing pictures was because some people can look at art as a photograph of something. Like, did it ever click like, okay, I'm looking at art and painted art, but to me it still felt like photography at a young age?
You know, photography was never really part of the world of art that I was exposed to.
Okay.
Right, and I think in a lot of ways it was kind of great. I was looking at like Renaissance paintings, modern art, you know, books on Lucian Freud, you know, like really the masters, I think, because that's what inspired my parents. Going to the museums, seeing that work, learning about different styles of painting. That was sort of where all of my references came from early on. It wasn't, photography was discovered in college. You know, I went to Kenyon College in Ohio and took photography 1 year in college, my last year. I was like, what a way to deal with people. Like, this is amazing. And then the process of photography was
Started from there.
Total magic to me.
So for me, I always looked at you like you. When I look at photography or any artist, I look at the other things that's connected to them, right? Like, you grew up in Ohio, and I want to know, even for like, what was in the house? Because you have a love for hip hop, deep love for hip hop music.
Yeah.
You know, I think for us, you know, Ohio wasn't really even on a map of not even knowing anything about music out there. Like, what growing up, what was that music experience for you, and when did that world of like your connection to hip hop come together for you?
I mean, I wasn't the typical household that people speak of. Like, there was always music playing in the house, and my parents had it, and they had the, you know, like, we had a stereo. It was super dope, mid-century modern, 2 speakers. Like, I'm gonna revitalize that because it's a thing, man. It's a vibe. But the musical journey was always a really personal one to me, you know. And I've been sort of studying and looking back at these steps. It was always something that was based on discovery and not anything that was handed to me, right? It was nothing that I like deeply like sought either. It was just kind of around, but it was like top 40 radio. You know, it was whatever the local stations were playing. It was calling in to try and win tickets. It was a concert that came in town on a pit stop to amplify the work beyond the major markets. But Cleveland is deep because we get a little bit of Chicago, we get a little bit of Texas, we get a lot of New York, we get a lot of LA. So like, we were sort of not, you know, especially when it came to hip hop, it wasn't like, yo, it's New York hip hop, son, it's nothing, it's Wu-Tang, it's Rakim, it's, you know, like we were like MC Breed, we were Scarface, we were Ghetto Boys, we were
Too Short,
you know, early Snoop, Too Short, we were Kane, DOC, like we were across the map. We were just absorbing it all. And I think that gave me a profound understanding of the range of hip hop that pulled me in deeply, 87, 88, 89, but really 88, 89, you know? But my love for music was like top 40, like The Police, Genesis, like, you know, Phil Collins,
Journey,
all of that.
Yeah.
But then there was like a crew of cats that were into this like alternative music. So it was The Cure, it was Depeche Mode, who's my favorite group of all time. You know, even now, above hip hop, it has this special nostalgia, right? So yeah, it's deep. Like, you know, would I choose to listen to just that album forevermore? Probably not. You know, the taste has fully expanded, but favorite, man, you know, for what they did and how they anchored my high school years. just as other artists have anchored the journey forward, like Big Daddy Kane and the DOC. Like, that is my love for hip hop, where it starts, and I can thank both of them, and have personally thanked both of them for what they gave of themselves to allow sort of a journey in hip hop to be revealed. That light bulb that goes off, like, oh, that's it. I'm going there, right? And even when deep decisions had to be made, like, I was gonna go to med school. I was studying psychopharmacology. Like, I could not be here at all. Like, you nearly didn't have me at all, hip hop, you know, like, because I was gonna go to med school and like study, well, there was art therapy, but it was like the effect of drugs on behavior. Like, I didn't want to do surgery, but I knew something in the medical arts.
Was for you?
Well, it could have been for me, but I was like, look, I could be an old doctor. A lot of old doctors, but you know, I can't be in the pits shooting rappers at, 50, says the 54-year-old in the pits shooting rappers. But you couldn't do it without like what came prior, Got you.
So let me ask
music is across the board, and then the discovery, through like Shabba Ranks, Supercat, Buju, was the entry point again. Sort of that 88 was starting to cultivate what I loved personally, and none of that was given. Like, played Elton John in the house, Bread. My mom loved Johnny Mathis. You know what I mean? Those were the musical sort of tastes. But then Sade, we like Sade, like little things like that would like sort of filter in through my folks. But really, it was a deep journey, and then those deep dives into crates, like going to record store, like, I need that. You're buying it because of the cover and what they look like.
The artwork.
So then it's the art balancing with the music, which I just found to be such a beautiful blend.
So it's funny, man, because everybody, college play, not even for education, it just seems like college plays a part of a big role in everybody's life I talk to. And it seems like college is now where you're coming into. You're still John, right? It's not Jonathan yet, right?
No, I think I was still John.
Okay,
but I think people started calling me Mannion.
Mannion at college.
Mannion, yeah, it was a little bit, well, like I took on some DJ names. So I did college radio. Okay. That was sort of a big, deep connectivity to the music, because we got all of the records from everybody, right?
Came to the station.
WKCO 91.9. Like,
that's
cool
the
DJ Johnny M in the mix. Like, but I didn't sound like that. I'm playing these tapes back.
Wait, the name Johnny M?
Johnny M. There was Johnny M. There was, Filet Mannion. You know what I mean? There was like, I don't know, I bought some cologne, like DJ Chanel for a minute. Like, you go through all the corny things. Like, I was trying to find my way, but I think like with the added benefit of feeling the vibe, I was like a happy, active, played soccer and tennis like all my life, like athlete, but I was excitable, you know what I mean? But I was like, I gotta slow it down. Let me get the octave a little bit lower. Let me, this is the bass, was like, this is needed now. This is a calmer thing to get the story out, to get the point across in whatever I was doing. Gotcha. Studying psychology, how to connect with people, but also doing art at the same time. So it was like a double psychology and art. But doing college radio, we were making 4-hour mixtapes, and we were throwing the parties, right? So we would just put the cassette in and just only have to flip it over, sort of when it went. But we were playing De La, Tribe, Common, Paris, like whatever records were coming in, we were spending some time.
Hearing this is like, even you said at a young age, buying records, looking at album covers is two levels of it. One is artistic and one is photography. But when did the photography world click to you? And it's funny because you already had a data bank of photography, the way that you looked at things.
I certainly had a data bank of imagery coming at me, but I look at some of the art projects that I was doing, and it was definitely inspired by looking at the art of album covers, right? The graphic design, the layout, the album, the names, how they were written, what font, the presentation. I think that was sort of a really, sort of beautiful discovery looking back at the work. But at that point, photography hadn't clicked because I hadn't really embraced it. I was drawing, I was designing, and I only took photography that final year at school and found that it was such a beautiful way to mark a moment that would never be the same again. And I love that stopped time and created a memory. And I think that was deep from a psychological standpoint. And I always kind of brought that forward as sort of a goal. Like, in this moment, I'm going to take the best photo of this person authentically to mark this moment. That person will grow or slide or whatever from that moment, but in that moment, this is what this man or woman is doing and about, or at least a translation of it that felt real.
So you already had captured an image in your mind with a meaning, because it's like you said, they cannot slip through time from this or here, but that moment.
Yeah.
So, wow, doing this, like the way you were like taking these pictures, was it like, okay, I want to do this in this genre now, or I just looked at this across the scope of everything?
I don't think that there was a deep understanding at that point in college, I had an incredible opportunity, and, obviously people know kind of the story because it anchors my arrival into New York. Was working for Richard Avedon, who is arguably like one of the greatest portrait photographers of all time. Certainly top 5. I don't think anybody would rate him less than that. And for some, he's number 1. For me, because of the personal connection and a deep understanding of that rhythm, he's number 1. But learning then a flow, a way to, sort of engage with people, to bring out storytelling, through portraiture, I think was what I learned from him. But I didn't have that skill set before. Like I was photographing barns in the middle of Ohio, like no stoplights, farmland, and I was doing barns, but I was doing it as meditation. It sounds weird, but I was just like, I was zenned out. I loved to drive. I would play music. I was a big R&B fan. I always have been. So it could have been Christopher Williams or Christopher Bender.
Christopher Cross.
Could have been sailing with Christopher Cross. Like a lot of the Chris's, man, it's all Chris.
Wow.
So like I was gone. You know what I mean? Just driving, and then I would stop and I would get out and I'd walk through a field, take a picture, come back. Like that's what I did my senior thesis on. But I did it as meditation. It wasn't a viable commercial way of living and being. It was an artistic expression of the passage of time, which in a deep way, you're not allowed to rip barns down. So you are marking the authentic moment of that barn in that moment. And a lot of them, by the end of a 6 month journey of taking these photos, had fallen, So like I got that moment before they are no longer, So like psychologically, that was always something that I brought forward as a goal. We've lost so many phenomenal artists within hip hop, right? And my duty and goal in the moment I am considering this is to take the most beautiful, portrait of this person with a wide range of emotion that really shows and showcases who they are, to be able to give that back to the world, to mark these moments as you're marking these moments today. Like it's the same goal in a lot of ways, like amplify the great voices, mark somebody in their, sort of biggest, most bold sense, and give it to the world. Like we're here for a short time, It's steep.
When you go after college now, and the journey is leading you to New York, what was that calling? I mean, we talked about the opportunity, but like, was it a job, an internship that brought you to New York, and what was that? Because now you're shooting the barns, you're shooting in college. Things are clicking emotionally, internally, psychologically when you're doing photography. But now you're in New York, which is, so you have the genes of grandfather and your father, and even London is the New York of overseas. But what was that now journey like, coming to New York, starting your photography journey?
Well, again, I had the opportunity to work with Avedon, right? And so that was like right into the city, 3 days of finding a bank account, somewhere to live, and then began. Like the interview question was, tell me about your parents, and I love my parents. So it was like easy, like just unfolded. He's like, he's perfect. I was hired off of one question. But, like I'd been through some different steps with other assistants who must have said, like, this kid is focused. Like, let's make this happen. But Kenyon gave Avedon an honorary degree the year that I graduated, right? So 3 previous assistants who were all still there at the studio went to Kenyon. He liked that we were well-rounded and able to adapt to any situation. And I think because of the people that he photographed, you needed to have more than just a technical photo geek understanding of the processes, of taking pictures. It was like worldly events and poetry and things that we can speak to. He really liked, as well as work ethic. So that was what really brought me to New York, is that opportunity. And I just sort of never looked back, because being in New York, working for this huge fashion photographer, portrait photographer, being on set, shooting Pirelli calendars, Versace campaigns, major stuff, a retrospective of all his work at the Whitney that we hung. I was like, I'm doing this. Naomi Campbell walking on set, naked, Christy Turlington, holding brambles, this far away from, I was a 22-year-old kid, we get to do this. This is something that is a job. This is hilarious. This is a job, people. I'm doing my job and getting paid to hold brambles away from arguably one of the most beautiful women on the planet.
In the world.
Still. But then, I was like, this is crazy. Let's do this. And then New York and the pulse of New York, was kicking off the Wu-Tang vibe. It was that. It was the clubs. It was a pure moment of solidarity in a lot of ways. New York in that moment was building energy to become this relentless force that we know it to be, right? It was the second wave after the Rakim kind of early stuff, right? It was Nas, Illmatic.
It was Mobb Deep, Tribe.
Literally, I was going by that bridge every single day that Danny Clinch shot, Nas underneath.
Wow.
To go to a warehouse to unroll Avedon's prints, taking car services back every day to unroll prints 3 inches at a time. Because otherwise the emulsion would crack, because these were vintage prints from the 60s.
So let me ask you this. So now you're in this I always say left hand, right hand for everything in life. Your left hand, you're over here with the greats and shooting the greats and working up close and personal with the greats, but the right hand's pulling you with this emerging of hip hop and culture and fashion and breakdancing. And did I don't know if it's John or Mannion or John.
Oh, I was Jonathan Mannion. I was Mannion. I was JM.
Okay, so now we're at Jonathan Mannion now, but it was a current pulling you to this side.
Yeah.
Probably with your camera. When did the world of still in this world as a job, under the tutelage of Batman, but now sneaking off as Robin to find the world of this music and this entertainment world?
I was never Robin, dog. No, I'm just kidding. No. Maybe I was. I don't know.
You had to be Robin under Batman.
I guess. Oh yeah, I guess under, right?
I mean, you couldn't be Batman. Well, we'll call you Bane. You Bane.
All right, fair.
We'll take Bane. But because even with me, I was under Prince Paul a lot of my times, and I was like, wow, I could never be him.
Yeah.
But I want to take a lot of that world and make it in my own lane.
For sure.
And hearing your story, fashion and that world, but when everybody look at you now, whoa, he took all that he learned in that world and took it over here. Where was that transition? When and how? And what was that first step of that new world of you doing that photography in the music industry?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came from being on set, seeing it happen, and seeing how much emphasis was on the clothes. I think at that moment, I didn't have a deep understanding. I didn't really have a deep care for the clothes over the person. You know what I mean? As a 22-year-old kid, it just wasn't my world. I had a deep appreciation for the craftsmanship. You know what I mean? Would watch fashion shows with my parents. They loved it. My dad was doing drawings. He thought he was going to be a fashion designer when he was young. He was going to go be Yves Saint Laurent in his mind. But yeah, I think. My understanding came because of the music that was being played, right? So it was instantly a balance of worlds. Like wake up 7 a.m., bring food to the studio, rock all the way through to the end of the day, 7, 8, 9 sometimes, leave, go home, have a slice of pizza because I was making $289 a week, eat the pizza, maybe a second slice if I was feeling frisky, you know? Mm-hmm. And then I go to the clubs. You know, there was like a group of people that were really dialed into what was happening on the scene. It was like, yo, Ill Al Scratch is performing at Esso's. Somebody's performing at, Supper Club. D'Angelo's performing at Supper Club. And I was just like, hey, I'm Jonathan Mannion. I'm shooting for the Source. Like, I'll bet, come on in. I wasn't shooting for the Source. I was going to bring the photos to the Source, but like, how do you present yourself? And in that moment, there weren't a lot of photographers. Yeah. There was a handful, who chose to do it passionately for free. In order to become a valuable puzzle piece to the growth of the movement, And I think a lot of people, hats off to everybody in the trenches at that time, who were moving around and finding a way to create their art and document what we felt and knew was really important because it allowed the movement to grow. Some have forgotten that. Others have not, but it is an essential element of hip hop, whether it's the sixth element, seventh, eighth, I don't know how many there are, right? There's the core 5 values of breakdance and graffiti, this, but like without photography, you're just telling stories and trusting people's imagination to paint the picture as vividly as it should be painted. Or we can show you this, here's Biggie on stage in the Throne. On stage with Lil' Kim, spitting lyrics in this outfit with silver balloons dropping from the sky, blunt smoke everywhere, and little Jonathan Mannion in the corner, smiling, loading film with a Kango on backwards and a vest looking like a Backstreet Boy, but happy as shit.
So now, still, like I said, you're still left hand, right hand, you're running out, learning your craft even better on your own, shooting what feels right to you, the music that you listen to in the morning, the album covers that you seen when you was in Ohio and traveling, and at the same time you're working in this whole fashion world. It comes a moment where everybody feels they know themselves and their craft. It's like the big boom theory for personal growth. When was that time that either, was it a picture, was it a moment? And because you're getting paid, but see, sometimes you can work a job in your field, but it still doesn't, the arrive moment. When was that arrive moment for you with a camera knowing like, I'm Jonathan Mannion. I see it, I feel it, in New York for you?
With the fullness of time revealing different layers of the story, I kind of go back to different moments. That moment on stage with Biggie that I sort of loosely described, 95 Platinum Party, Biggie on stage. I'm on stage, happy, joyful. I'm smiling, cheesing on stage, holding Lil' Kim's hand. I look back at that photo as the cornerstone photo of it all.
Now, but that was it. It's so interesting you said it because that is a moment. I remember, same with me. It was a long time. I was same. It's funny because Gravediggers was on the tour with Biggie on stage, and I was like, I was seeing Big, and I was like, he had the black jersey, yellow beard. I was on the stage with Big, and I was like, I'm in hip hop.
Yeah.
But now, what was wild, and it's funny, the same story. I mean, almost the same picture, because I wasn't doing nothing. I wasn't DJing that night. I was just a fan of the culture, but I was like, I'm right here. Was it the same for you that moment, or was you taking pictures on stage, but somebody caught you in that moment?
It's enough to just be there. That counted too.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But I was on stage shooting, right? I happened to be loading film. There's a picture that I just found. I think it was Coy who shot it. And there's some video footage as well, like of it. So it was just like to look back and to see me smiling, it filled my heart that how I remember it was also how I presented myself. And I think that energy and how I captured the moment was serious. So like me happy doing my craft seriously has allowed the two worlds to exist simultaneously. the happiness and joy that I received from taking these pictures, for getting to do what I loved to do, and then creating images that would last forever, right? Wow. So that Biggie is a huge piece. You know, shooting Heavy D in general, you know, I had such massive respect for him and Uptown Records and that whole movement, like what he established. And for him to say, "You're gonna be my eyes," huge compliment that he saw something maybe that I didn't even at that moment see in myself, whether it was a dedication or the craftsmanship or whatever. It was just opportunity. I was allowed in. Somehow I was part of it. Right, being part of it. And there's no way not to mention Reasonable Doubt in '96 as my first album cover. His first album, my first album cover, walking around New York City, seeing like the Snipes like take up a whole block, and, like physically like hitting the wall, like
that's a strong trinity. When you say Biggie, Jay, and Heavy D, like as your moments.
Yeah, of
arriving,
actualizing the arrival. Like, yo, I'm here. Because, you know, each of them were points of departure in a lot of ways. You know, I wanted to do album cover because I always wanted to be mentioned in the same sentence as the music, right? Magazine covers up, down in a month, up, down in a month. Albums, forever. Close your eyes, think about, you know, Bob Marley, Kaya. Oh yeah, I know that, black and white things. You know, like, you know these moments in time, you know. Coltrane, Kinda Blue, close, got it. Yeah, Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, cool.
Nirvana,
DMX,
The Baby.
Flesh of My Flesh. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, these album covers, because of how they attach to the music and because of how each work to support that memory, you need a visual to the music, and vice versa, or at least it's more ideal. You might be able to remember it from just a scent alone, or a photo alone, or the music alone. But like the connectivity of them, I always found really powerful. You know, to mark a moment like, oh yeah, that's from that album. I know that album, I know that picture, but I never heard that song. Or like, oh yeah, that whole album I played all the way through. It's amazing, and you did the cover for that. It's crazy. You know, to be interwoven into people's run of show. I look at sort of DMX as the prime example of that. The two albums dropped in that year, Dark and Hell is Hot and Flesh of My Flesh, are both mine, right? Because we had a synergy going, and we had, you know, a deep connection. And, you know, today it's even more powerful because there's other examples afterwards. But in that moment, it solidified how we understood what we were doing together and how important it was.
So, wow, it's a time travel hearing you talk about it. And even for me, just as a fan, like you said, album covers, and the music, and they can't leave with each other. It's left hand, right hand. So one of the things that, you know, getting to talk to a lot of different people, because you're an artist, you know, I hate that the word photographer gets to you alone, because it's literally artist / photographer, or photographer / artist. You know, we only look at more people when they like music, that's an artist, or painter, but photographer is an artist. When in a serious part of like a lot of people business is when it changes to business. Because now you had a job and you was working at, and that was a dream, but then you started shooting these photos and getting these album covers. What was that transition for you, especially, you know, going into hip hop? It was hard for all of us. Understanding, we had no tutelage, we had no training, there's no rule book of how to charge. If that's a producer or a photographer, I don't care what you are. It was like we was coming up when everything was just being learned and built. Yeah. What was that transition for you, like being in these moments, shooting these historic covers, working with the greats, but now that's becoming a business, learning how to charge, and, you know, getting a fair rate. But like, what was that like for you, and how did you navigate through that time?
It didn't matter what I was getting paid, because I was so young and I had no real responsibilities, you know, other than like rent, eating, basic stuff, like buy some fly baseball hat, you know what I mean? Like, what is really dumb, a fresh pair of kicks, but even that didn't really matter as it matters these days, you know what I mean? Like, yo, what you rocking? Ah, yeah, son, I see them, you know? Like, it was a whole different situation. So it didn't really matter. Like, I felt I was for sure undercharging based on how much money was being left on the floor during like the heydays of, you know, like a 15-year run with Def Jam. Like, you know, they're not laughing at me, but I just didn't care. I felt like, hey man, I'm cool with that. What you got? Yeah, great, cool. Or like, hey man, I got this on last time. Can we do the same? Or is it a little bit bigger artist? Oh man, well tell me what you need. Oh, you need a little more? Okay, cool. But it was really about saying, here's my creative idea, and this is what it takes to do the idea. I was less concerned about what I was getting. You know, like almost every music video that I did, I never really got paid to do because I put it all into
the project,
what was going on screen, which could never be a sustainable way to work, which is why I stuck with photos. It just seemed like it was, conceptually, I understood it more, that you prep, you prepare, you get there, you have 72 plans, because ultimately the artist is going to pick one or two that he hates and another three that he's sort of interested in, and then you lose light on the other ones, and you got to have your answers like ready. But ultimately photos made more sense, and I think that it was a more pure delivery of my vision, because it was me and the artist, and I could make a whole room evaporate because of my focus and my passion.
Wow.
You know, like just like gone. It's just me and this person. You know what I mean? And like what we're doing. And oftentimes I was like, I'd lean in halfway through when there was a moment of focus and a moment of clarity that each of us felt, some sort of energy connection. Like, it's only me and you, right? Right? They don't care. They're on their phones. Stylist is over there. Someone's prepping something. Someone's eating food. Someone's taking like, yo, it's just me and you, right? Like, let's do this. And like to have those moments of individual connection, I think is also what made people understand how steady I was and have always been, and take pride in being, right? That it was always in service of their vision.
Never about the money.
It was always in service of them. It wasn't a job to get bread, to get stuff. Stuff came. You were part of a journey. There's good days and bad days. You get stiffed out of a $25,000 job because they're like, it's going to be greater later. Don't worry about it. I'm like, no, I don't worry about it. I just dumped all this cash and you left me hanging, bro. Okay. And then you realize like, oh, wow, I'm an investor in this thing. There's going to be good days. There's going to be wins, losses. Keep going. If that's going to stop you, it's not going to stop you. You just keep going, and you learn the lesson. And I think once you learn the lesson, you become sharper, right? And just more savvy about how to present yourself. But it's always rooted for me in creativity, in fairness, in the final product, and in making something that's like forever and timeless and can never be erased and taken away. And I think that's the bar for me, is to make something, really meaningful every single time out, because you never know when it's your last time out or somebody's last time out. It gets deep and it gets heavy, but we're sort of at that age, and you realize that there's a major importance because of how life shifts. And maybe this younger generation doesn't feel it in quite the same way, but I've seen it throughout the entire journey. This is a really fast life that we're living, and these kids are living fast, like triple fast now, because of how connected the world is.
Now the world is seeing photos of Jonathan Mannion, album covers after album covers, like you said, the DMXs, the J's, the Eminems. But I remember it was a photo that I learned about your work, which was a Kevin Garnett photo. And the intensity of him as a person is amazing. It's crazy. The intensity of him in basketball is another thing. And I remember I asked, it's funny when sometimes you look at photography. Photography is something that a lot of people, the average person, don't ask who shot it. They'll just say, that's a great picture. Can I buy it? But like a lot of details, like you said, in album covers, a lot of people do want to know who shot it.
Right.
I'd seen this picture, and I was like, who shot that? And they said, Jonathan Mannion. And what entertainment is sometimes I look at it like racism. It's very segregated. It's like, a sports photographer would never shoot album covers. A fashion photographer would not shoot cooking. And then I was like, wait, the rap album photographer dude shot that? And I was like, but the emotion in an athlete it's almost like the same emotion of DMX was in that Kevin Garnett photo. And like, what was that transition for you to start shooting athletes and sports and like, but you captured it with the same passion?
It's funny, that image that I think you're speaking of, a profile of KG, who is one of the most like amazing human beings, one, two, but like such a joy to photograph. Like if you take a bad picture of KG, it's your fault. Like, because that dude can do really no wrong. And it's funny you mentioned DMX because I think I tried to call him on set, or did call him from his house because he was a huge DMX fan. And I was like, oh, it's my guy. Like, yo, you need to think. I was like playing DMX on his intercom through his house. I remember some weird stuff at his house, man. And when he signed his crazy deal, we had photographed him right there. But that was the first session that was, hey, we think this is a good idea. And it was XXL. I was doing all the XXL stuff. And then they opened Slam. And I was like, hey, would you shoot KG and Stefan? I was like, yeah, Timberwolves, like, sure. A cover, like, yeah, wow, that makes sense. They're like, we just don't want to take the traditional NBA, hand under the ball, hand on the other hip. Like, you know, it's just like, yo, we're trying to, you know, really showcase the depth of their personality. These athletes all wanted to be rappers, and all the rappers wanted to be athletes, right? And so that sort of instant sort of observation in my mind was like, that makes sense. Let's rock. And
I didn't even know. See, I'm talking about a solo image. I don't even remember if this. I didn't know you shot that image of them, Stefan. It was. That
was my first Slam cover.
That was your first Slam cover.
Yeah.
Now I don't know the timeline. Was that picture the start of when then they shot Allen Iverson? With after that and like
After.
Because it seemed like
I think that was Clay Patrick McBride to big him up. He was crushing it as well.
I think that was the first image where if it was a photo to describe basketball as hip hop and hip hop as basketball, that's the image.
Yeah. But you got that as well. All the mixtapes. I mean, it's just like,
but
total sense.
I was a video.
Yeah.
And if you had to say a picture, because I think a cover after that, and if you shot, I don't know, it was Darius Miles, Quentin Richardson, and Elton Brand. It was them three. But your cover started that imagery,
right?
Because I think KG and them had chains on too. They like, and it was the swag of them, the way they like one was sitting facing and. But
that was it. They knew that they didn't have like an NBA standard issue photographer. They had the guy that shot Reasonable Doubt, DMX, some like, yo, we got this guy. Like, let's go. Wow. I literally shot KG with an 8x10 camera that day. It was that I learned from working with Avedon to bring it full circle. You know, it's a wooden camera from like the late '60s, a Deardorff, like, you know, under a hood with the, you know, the dynamite flash and the like the sheets of film were this big, and I was like, I'm just going for it. I was like, would you take your shirt off? I mean, you've got to be a specimen of fitness. And he had that crazy chain on. It was like maybe the Virgin of Guadalupe, or, you know, sort of like just full adornment. You allowed, you know, Slam, and, you know, through the vision and lens captured and upheld, they allowed them to be who they were.
Wow.
Right? And who they were was also influenced by the same stuff that we were influenced by as photographers, as videographers, as people like navigating the culture and like trying to like play the part, to be seen, to have their own sort of moment of sharing their identity with others, which is what this whole hip hop thing is about, is like sharing and understanding. Like, we are all the outcasts, right? But as together, like, we're a united force, man. Like, we are unstoppable. And I think when hip hop sort of had a moment of disbanding or like sort of losing their way is when everybody thought they didn't need anybody else, you know? And I felt that it shifted the energy, I think, you know, because like they'd reached a pinnacle and they're like, oh, I don't need anybody else, but it was all that you needed, because that's what it got you there. You know?
So let me ask you this, because like, for me, anything I do, if that's music, if that's directing, if that's curating, it all starts with a story, you know. If I get to know the story of the person, the brand, the product, everything else after that is easy, you know. And first of all, your career has been seamless. The magic that you have shot from fashion people to athletes to actors, all the people. Is it a process that you go through to keep this same Jonathan Mannion mantra for everybody you shoot?
I think it's a privilege to do what I do. You know, it's to have this access to constantly be trying to sharpen your vision. You know, I mean, it's the artist's way. Like, you're never there. It's just a journey until you decide it's not for you anymore. But I think real artists are like, yo, I'm doing this. Like, let's go. Let's see where this thing goes. This is awesome. This has been amazing. You know, since I've been in New York, it's been an amazing 32-year run. Wow. 32 years, man. This is like, yeah. And it's still like, I get to shoot Sean Paul, who's going to come to my studio, who wanted 4 looks, and I gave him 9 because I couldn't stop. Because I couldn't stop, and he was willing to stay. Like, I get to do this. Like, this is my job. But, like, beyond a job, it's like, you know, it's gift giving as well, to extend yourself and your skill to somebody else for the betterment of somebody else. This is service. This is ministry. This is beyond, like, I do a job.
Wow. So I guess so many, it's beyond, it's you meet people and you get to sit, and I get to sit and talk with artists, and it's like, there's a DNA of who you are, and photography is the bonus, because your heart and your spirit is put behind that camera. And I think you know that's the answer I got, is that the person, no matter who the subject is, if it's that barn that's being turned down through the process of 6 months, versus on stage with Biggie, but Naomi Campbell walking nude in front of you, all the way now to Sean Paul, nothing has changed one bit.
I mean, everything has changed. It's constantly changing. But, like, if you embrace the change.
The person.
Well, yeah, I think if you are, look, I'm adaptable, I'm movable and shiftable. You know, it's like that sort of water mentality. Like, yeah, you can flow. I'm good anywhere. Drop me anywhere, I'm good. You know, and different people need different things. But I think it really is a deep understanding that, like, there is a talent. I have a really good job. I'm really good at it. But, like, who are you? Like, what do you stand for? What are your moral values? How do you treat people? How do you want to be remembered? Like, all of these deep questions, and every meme that you read and whatever, that's all like a little calibration. But how do you absorb, you know, the really deep work that then enables you to be this whole human being, to present yourself vulnerably in its fullness to somebody else, in service of somebody else, but to know that you'll win in the process by giving. Like, every time I've given way more than you know, like, you walk in with a mentality of generosity, but every time I've given, I've received so much more. Like, full selfless giving. It's just like, no, I'm just going to give. I'm going to give more, and I'm going to give more, and I'm going to give more. Even if they don't appreciate it, I'm going to give more. It comes back. It comes back, like, so heavy. And, like, that's the reward. Is like, you get to be a great human being with dear friends and amazing circles and more opportunities. You know, like, that is not, it does not go unnoticed by the people who have their eyes open in this industry and in this world, that you are here for a purpose that is higher than the bag and, you know, a job, you know, like, it's beautiful.
When you look at this whole journey and going forward, because photography to me is never going anywhere. To wrap this all up in the journey of Jonathan Mannion continuing to go forward, where do you want to see you and your photography go to when this all is said and done? Where do you want to see you and your photography live on to?
You know, I'm at a point where I'm doing a book. It's coming next year. It's a long time coming. It's overdue, but it's right on time. It's codifying the legacy, right? To really walk the steps of the journey, because I was always a go forward guy. Keep going, next, cool, next, awesome, deliver on time, deliver on budget, cool, next. Now it's like, what did I do? Like, yo, let me find the beautiful story that is my own story. Not the story of like, oh, let me tell you about this job I did with somebody. This is what he said. This is what he did. This is what it was about. It's like, here's my story. Let me share, you know, because I think that's an inspiration for a lot of people who are not going to be in that white hot spotlight on stage. They're going to be of service through their talent to the greater good of whatever movement they choose to be part of, right? And I think it's that time. Codify the legacy, make sure that it's like, I get to tell the story before somebody else tells it in a way that's not the truth. Because there is the truth. There's my truth. There's the truth. And then there's like other people's impression of how it went.
Non-truth.
Right? I want you to know exactly and purely what it was about.
Well, Jonathan, thank you for telling your story, your truth on Compound Conversations.
Man, thank you so much. Please, round of applause, set free, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Thank you, my God. I love you. That was, man, I was like emotionally choked up or something.